So good morning, and I am so thrilled to spend some quality time with Beth Campbell. So wave hi, Beth, as well as six fabulous sixth grade students from Hopewell Elementary in Iowa. And again, if you can introduce yourselves rapid fire, starting with one of the gentlemen on my left, and then we're going to have a conversation about conversational competence. So.
Hi, I'm Ethan.
I'm Kaylee.
I'm Claire.
I'm Lizzie.
I'm Harrison.
I'm Ben.
Fantastic. And so we've had a quick conversation already about what conversational competence is. So can we have a quick recap of the ideas that we've come up with so far? So what does that mean to you?
Well, to me, conversational competence is, I think it really helps to be confident in your words and not really change who you are, because if you're listening to somebody and they're not really confident in what they're saying, you may not be as engaged or as interested in what they're saying, because it may seem like they're just talking almost.
Now, Harrison, I know that you are a part of the sixth grade team that have been developing podcasts all year. So when you're starting to think about the idea of confidence when you're being recorded, what does that look like for you?
Well, some kids will change how they speak or how they act on camera, and what's better is just to be yourself and film and do things have a conversation and be your own personal self.
So, but we also had a quick chat about sometimes when you're trying to be yourself, you start thinking about when you're listening to yourself back on the recording, some small moves that you might need to change. So can one or two of you talk about that?
Here, I'll go. So I really, this is a really big problem. I talk really fast whenever I'm reading. So what I really had to change was, I was sounding like I was rapping. I sounded like Eminem. So I had to, so I would just try to read so hard, put my finger on my computer and just read slowly and not just keep reading really fast. So that was one of the quick things I had to change along the way. And that was really the main thing that for us three, that was our big thing. We had to, for me, it was to talk slower, and that was it.
And also, if you're listening back on yourself, you should be able to say, that was me talking. That's how I normally talk. You shouldn't have to change who you are just because a camera or a microphone is rolling. You should be able to be yourself and say, oh, yes, that was me, and that's how I normally am around other people.
Mm-hmm. So the cool part about your podcasts is that you do them together. So it's not a solo enterprise. What have you found about the power of doing this as a team, but also some of the challenges that it requires when you're having a conversation and you're recording it at the same time?
Well, one of the challenges we came across was when Ben, we just call him by his last name for some reason. There's 4 Bens in our grade, but Ben, he came across he got a concussion, and so me and Harry had to tackle a podcast, just the two of us, and so it's kind of hard to not have that third person that was helping us get on track, because me and Harry get off task easily sometimes. So Yegi or the teacher usually gets us back on track, and so
another thing that we used is that we would act like there was no microphone and nobody was listening to us, and we would just have a normal conversation.
Do you want to? Yeah.
We work together a lot in a lot of different things, which I think helps make it more comfortable, because we do stuff outside of this podcast together as a group. Mm-hmm. So I think we already know each other's strengths and how each other talk and what they like in books and stuff like that. And I felt that really helped us through this as a team, helped build team building almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, especially when we're making our podcast, we build off of each other's ideas. If someone says let's have this in our podcast, and then we're oh, we should add this idea too, to add a new perspective. And so I feel we like help each other and are able to build off of each other's ideas to improve our podcast and to make it more natural and human.
So
I think
oh, go ahead.
so for what really helped us is for like we read a lot of sports books, and so it kind of helped us keep engaged with like reading because we really liked sports. So it was really just kind of fun to read sports books. Like they would read like just new books overall, and I think that would have kind of downgraded our podcast because it helped us express ourselves better, I would say.
So one of the things that I'm seeing right now in real time is that you're naturally very much building on one another's thinking. So it's so lovely to see that that's part of the process and how you continue to grow conversational competence. Because I think the interesting part is not just being who you are, like Harrison suggested. It's also really starting to think about the ideas that Claire's starting to pay attention to, the importance of listening to somebody and sort of understanding and appreciating what they're trying to say and how you can continue to connect or build from it. And I think that's the power of what I've seen as I've listened to the podcasts that you've done so far.
It really helps when we can build off of each other, because it almost, we try and make our scripts sound like we're building off of each other, or even sometimes we'll just have like we'll have a sentence, but we might say around that sentence not necessarily the same thing, because it really does sound more like a conversation if it's not ending, like if you don't have a full, if you know exactly what you're going to say, it almost sounds a little less conversational. It sounds more conversational if you like maybe stumble over a few words or something, because that's just kind of natural. And then if like Kaylee were to cut in and be like, oh, I know what she's trying to say, that I think helps a lot in sounding like a conversation.
And to build off of that, of like the team building, we kind of, so at the our first podcast, we were having a tough time like getting hold across the whole point. So we looked at one of their podcasts, and then that gave us a way better idea. So you know that you have something to look at for help rather than just winging it and doing it by yourself.
And also, if you like look at the more professional podcasters, then it helps you because you can learn from what they're doing and what they're good at, and then you can put that into your podcast.
Were there some podcasts that you took a look at, not only one another's, but were there a couple of examples that stood out to you?
There was like this one where it was like kind of like a summer themed, and it's like these group of people who do like, it's kind of like music kind of, where it's like we listened to it in class, and it's like this summer themed podcast where they're like sharing like thoughts and things like that.
Yeah.
Like a little kids theme type of thing.
And to be honest, before I was really podcasting, I personally would have never gone on to the podcasting app on my phone and actually said, oh, I want to listen to a podcast today. Right. I never had listened to a podcast before and was like, okay, maybe I should try listening to other people's podcasts to try to see how we can make ours better. And that definitely really helped me personally, like saying, okay, we probably shouldn't say this word 5 times in the same 2 minutes.
Yeah, my mom really enjoys podcasts, so I actually have heard a bunch of different types of podcasts. I heard like a sciencey animal one, and that one was one of my favorites because every episode there were 2 people on it, and there was a girl and a boy, and the girl always acted one way. Like she always had a funny joke of the day, and she always talked really fast. Like she kind of had her personality
her ways
built, and she through their script and everything, she was almost always that funny side note like character. And then the guy was almost the more serious character, and you knew this because throughout all their podcasts, every single one, she would be like playful and silly, and he'd be like, okay, now we need to get back on task. And it like, and that helped us, I think, because then we created stuff that like we had every podcast, and we created parts that like Claire's really good at describing a theme of a book, and so like we kind of gave our people through our podcast personalities.
Yeah, I also feel from listening from other ones, we experimented with different ideas and we figured out what ones worked and what ones didn't. Like, I know we tried to do a giveaway. It didn't work as good as we hoped, so we did a different idea. So it's kind of just, and then we had like a consistent layout for our script each time because we came into that pattern of having like an intro, background, conclusion, like takeaways, maybe like some jokes embedded into there. And so it was kind of from those ideas of other podcasts, we were able to experiment and play with them to figure out what fit our podcast.
Yes.
Once you put it out into the universe, once you edited it and sort of submitted it, what kind of feedback did you get?
Well, I know personally I've had like family listen to it and they say, oh, I always know that this one girl will do this and this one person will always do this, but this person, maybe they should have something that they always do. Or they'll say, maybe this person should not have as many lines, or this person should talk slower. And so you always get kind of feedback from people you trust. And I think that really helped us along the way as well.
I think for our podcast, I'm the big explainer guy. So I always go on these big paragraphs, and so then I always want to take all the big paragraphs, so I wrote it. So that's like my problem. So then I kind of be selfish with it a little. So but then I had to give it a line, like a few of them, to Harry and Ethan because I'm like the guy that just keeps rambling and on about something.
So you learned a bit about yourself and how you can continue to be generous to your podcast mates. Other things that you learned once you released it out into the universe.
I'm going to interject real quick because I think they're missing a huge one. We got a lot of author feedback from books and people that we had tagged via Twitter. So do you guys want to talk about that at all?
Here, so we got, I think we got talked. So on my Edge blogs, I got talked like a comment by Tommy Greenwald. So that was kind of a big honor for me.
That's huge.
Yeah, and so he really helped me. He wasn't really like he was patting me on the back a bit, like on how I did well, but he also gave me some pointers and some tips of like what I should do better and what I can keep improving on.
And also, we've had the opportunity this year, at least more than previous years, we've had the opportunity to Skype with authors. And I remember specifically when we did profit calls, we Skyped the author and we all cosplayed as the girls on the front cover.
Because it's two blondes, redhead, and so two blondes and a redhead.
And so I remember we were like in the process of making it, and she was talking about her experiences and what she had done, and we like there was other times we did it as well, but we took what they said and we shortened it and we said we need to add this into the podcast to show the listeners like what the author has gone through and what the author wants them to take away from that book.
Yeah, I also believe didn't like a school in our district
Yes.
feedback?
Yes.
Was it
Bridgeview.
Mr. Beausoleil's class.
Yes.
Another school in our district like gave us feedback at the beginning of the year from episodes they've heard in like the previous school year, and like some of them were very interesting. Like you guys always say, I agree with you, I agree with you, I agree with you. I like that idea. Maybe you should have a part where you disagree with them. So it's like a new perspective. So yeah, we tried to take on that idea too. And it's like getting the feedback is all about getting it from different sources and different people and different perspectives. So you're able to have a variety of advice.
So going forward, because the legacy is that you're almost finished with your 6th grade year. You're pretty close, right? Couple of days to go. And there's going to be a new group of 6th graders that are going to be filling your shoes. So if you can go around the table, what's one piece of advice to build conversational competence for the next year's group of kids?
So you really just gotta express yourself and just let people know who you really are.
And adding on to Ethan, you can't change who you are because the camera's rolling. You have to be yourself and be able to like have a conversation and remember that it's a podcast that you're doing in 6th grade with your friends. You have to have fun with it and make sure that you're not getting too serious about it because it's still a podcast, but you want to make sure that you have fun with it along the way.
I would say that in like the process of editing and writing your podcast scripts, tighten up your language, because we struggled with that at first, and we would have these long, lengthy episodes that would get up to like 20 minutes, and no one's gonna want to listen to that long of a podcast. And also, when you're like just talking with someone about a book you absolutely love, you aren't like in super formal language, like in the book it's stated this is the book. Like you have just a natural conversation of parts you loved and things you took away. And so we try to like kind of not necessarily take away but improve like our sentence starters, that it wasn't so choppy and it became more natural and something that our audience would really be engaged in.
Mine would be put time into it. You can't write the script, edit it, and then not touch it until you record it. Because the minute you do that, and we know because we've done that, the minute you do that, you start sounding really robotic, and you take more time on sentences than you need, and it doesn't sound right because you've never, like, you've read it, but you've never, like, actually read it before.
Yeah. And
so it's like reading a new paragraph out loud, and that makes it so much less, that takes away from the conversation so much.
Mine would be just to be yourself and be truthful and honest. And like she said, put hard work and time into it, and it will definitely pay off.
So mine would be don't shy away from your personality, but there's definitely a time for everything. There's a time to be goofy and silly. There's a time to be serious and actually do some work in the podcast. So we're our group. We're kind of silly, so we like to mess around a lot.
But sometimes we can't do that because we gotta keep helping them out.
But then we realize after 10 minutes of talking, we got to start getting our podcast done.
Yeah.
So the last thing is, want to make sure that I'm attaching a podcast that you feel very connected to. So can each of the two groups say what's the one podcast that you're most proud of and why? And we'll attach those two.
So for our group, it would probably be Game Changer, because I'm a life lesson person, and in that book there were a lot of life lessons and things like that.
Yeah, so we really connect. Me and Harry did it, and Ethan too. Sorry, Ethan. But we really connected to it because we all play football, and we always mess around and play football and play sports. And we kind of got our attention, like when you got to be serious when you're playing sports. So, like you can get a really bad like head injury, like Tommy. So you really gotta. Ted, I keep calling Tommy because of Tommy Greenwald. My bad. So that was we really related to that one. That was probably our best one.
Yeah.
Okay. Adding on to Harrison's, it had a lot of life lessons because about like peer pressure and like being safe when you're playing a sport and all that. We really took away and resonated with that book.
To be aware.
Yeah, we're aware.
Fantastic.
You guys want to?
What do you think?
Ours was,
They're torn.
They're torn. All right, we can attach two. So what did you narrow it down to?
You guys can take.
Okay.
So we have two.
we really liked Coyote Sunrise, The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise, our podcast, because we really liked the book. And as I was saying earlier, when you really like the book, you tend to be more excited about the podcast, and just it comes more naturally when you actually really like the book.
And you resonate with it more.
I would also say The Prophet Calls, because it was such a different book that I've never read something like it. And we started out at kind of like that level where like it was a good podcast. It was, but it wasn't as great as it could be, and it wasn't as powerful as it should be because the book was so deep and different. And so we were able, with like advice from our teachers and from the Skype with the author and looking from a different perspective, we were able to kind of take it to the next level and look beyond the book and more into like what it actually means and what the purpose of this book was. And we were able to like really explore the depth and knowledge that is input into the book.
Adding on to Claire, I really feel like from our last podcast to our first podcast, you can just see so much growth. Like if you look at the first podcast we did compared to like Profit Calls, which I think was the most recent one we did, you almost want to say it wasn't the same group, but you know it was, because we just have grown so much and we've learned so much through it. I feel like the Profit Calls really just shows our growth through podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with me. And again, just so proud of the quality of the work that you've done. And again, I encourage everybody to download the powerful work that your sixth grade teams have done, and the continued work that Hopewell Elementary is doing for the next year's group of sixth graders. So thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.